Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Advocacy in Action, Meet Michigan's Quad, presented by Rocket Mortgage. Please welcome the Vice President of Government Relations at the Detroit Regional Chamber, Brad Williams.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Rocket Mortgage, not only for providing my mortgage, but also providing us the opportunity to provide such a valuable program for our members. You know, there's been a number of things about working from home during the pandemic that have been really inconvenient, too many to count. But one of the things that has been great this year was the speed that we were able to get through our new legislator meet and greets. We do these every 2 years, try to meet with all the new members of the legislature. And because we could do them this year on Monday and Friday and do them via Zoom, we got through them really quickly. Normally, we'd be just getting them done this year because we have to compete with committee meetings and receptions in Lansing. But we got them done really early in January. Let me tell you, we've got a lot of really good new legislators this year. If I started naming them as individuals, I'd start leaving them out. So I'm not going to do that. But it's safe to say that the Republicans and Democrats did a really good job of recruiting good candidates this last cycle. And so I'm pretty confident that Michigan's in good hands. During these meet and greets, we start going through chamber public policy priorities. But one of the things I really enjoy is sitting and listening to these new legislators who come from all corners of the state and what they're passionate about. And because the chamber has such a wide variety of interests, usually their interests intersect with something that the chamber is also working on, and we can build a relationship from there. But this year, as I was leaving these Zoom meetings, there was one message I left them with, and that was for them to ask us for our help. Because this legislature and the four individuals you're about to hear from today are, in my mind, the most consequential group of 148 people who have gathered under the Capitol Dome in my lifetime, and I think probably anyone's lifetime who's listening in today. They've already been through a lot, and there's going to be a lot more that they go through together. But, the governor made an announcement yesterday that, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting bigger, and it's getting bigger every day. So I know we're going to hear him talk about that with our moderator, Rick Pluta. And Rick is my favorite party trick on a Capitol tour. Inevitably, when we're on a Capitol tour, someone on my Capitol tour is a devoted public radio listener, and they are super excited to see Rick and see his face after years of listening to him on the radio. And then they are even more impressed when I can tell them that he is my friend. So I am even more excited to hear Rick moderate this panel today. So in just a few minutes, we're going to hand it off to Rick. But before that, we're going to hear from our sponsor, Rocket Mortgage. So enjoy this program. I know I'm going to.
Please welcome Jared Fleischer, Vice President of Government Affairs for Rock Central at Quicken Loans Family of Companies.
Good morning. We are pleased to bring you this unique opportunity to hear from the leaders of Michigan's legislature together and in one place. Well, I should say on one screen. At Quicken Loans and Rocket Mortgage, we are as committed as ever to our home city of Detroit and the state of Michigan. You may have seen that our founder and chairman, Dan Gilbert, recently made a 10-year philanthropic commitment to the city of Detroit. You may know that we have a team working every day on the effort to make vaccines as available and accessible as possible. Like all of you, we care deeply about our great state and know how critical public policy is to our future. And we are at a particularly important moment for policy. We are hopefully in the final chapters of the war against COVID-19. And then we must win the peace in terms of ensuring that our economy not only recovers, but grows. Obviously, public policy looms large in our recovery. Among many other critical issues, our legislative leaders have decisions to make on how to invest record sums of federal funding coming from the federal government that will have a profound impact in shaping our future. So without further delay, we are pleased to support this important gathering of our legislative leaders. Please enjoy.
Please welcome Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, Speaker of the House Jason Wentworth, Senate Minority Leader Jim Ananich, House Minority Leader Donna Lasinski, and to moderate the discussion, Senior Capitol Correspondent for Michigan Public Radio Network, Rick Pluta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, leaders, for allowing me the opportunity to question you. It's quite an honor and quite interesting. And we don't get the chance to do that very much in the remote COVID environment. I'd like to reinforce something that Brad just said, that I've been covering the Capitol since 1987. And, through events including the Great Recession. And I think this may be the most consequential session that we've got. You've got a lot resting on your shoulders and on the a lot at stake in the decisions that you make. So, quick note: we understand that there's been a lot of contentious discussions about what's happened, and we really want to make this session forward-looking so that we can give the people watching an idea about what's going to happen next. So, the big news, obviously, this week was Governor Whitmer's announcement that restrictions will be tied to some pretty specific data points, especially vaccination rates. Where does that place us on the road to maybe some near consensus about how Michigan should move forward next? And since Speaker Shirkey, you're at the top of my column, why don't we start there?
Speaker Wentworth might be a little offended by that.
I'll live with it.
Okay, good. I'm glad that the governor has finally given indication of what are she going to be paying attention to lift all restrictions. I think that we need a little more discussion on this metric of vaccines alone. I believe there's a little more breadth that need to be taken into consideration there, especially if we run into resistance and reluctance that causes us to plateau below the numbers that have been indicated. And so I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to do so.
Speaker Wentworth?
Yeah, I agree with the majority leader that, the hope and certainty that people need in this state right now is we've never seen something like this. I mean, the desperation people are in, our kids are falling behind, business owners are hanging on by a thread. Families need some sense of hope and certainty. And I think the governor definitely provided that. But as the majority leader stated, there's other variants, there's other issues that we need to address and not just look at a vaccination rate. I think that's important. I think accessibility, people that want to get the vaccine should be able to have the ability to get the vaccine same day. And so that's something I think as a state we should be able to focus on to hit those goals, to make sure we do have that light at the end of the tunnel. But as was already stated, if we were to plateau, what are we going to look at as far as the infection rates and other things to help us kind of not go backward, continue to look ahead.
Okay. Lasinski? Leader Lasinski?
Thank you. Moving to vaccination rates really represents the progress that we've been able to make in our state. We now are at a point where we have a distribution system that's in place that is receiving enough vaccines that we are able now to do same-day appointments and walk-in appointments. University of Michigan Hospital just announced that. Meyer is able to do that. Some great corporate participation there from pharmacies and others across our state. Now that we've reached that point, and as I'm sitting here in my husband and I's company offices here without employees, we know that it is vaccinations and vaccination rates that are going to allow our employees to return here to our offices safely in a way that we know we can continue to do business every day more successfully, frankly, in person than we're able to do remotely. If we reach a plateau, that's where we as leadership in this state need to work together on sharing the facts about vaccination, coming together around PSA, public service announcement commercials, joining with the business community and helping speed vaccine distribution. And frankly, we have more dollars to do that. Unfortunately, they are sitting in Washington, D.C., and we need to get those dollars home to do all the things we need to do to help our citizens be as informed as they can to make their vaccination decision. They have the facts, they can get vaccinated, and we can get back to work.
Leader Ananich?
Thank you. I'll be short because my colleagues did a great job of articulating, I think, what we all feel. I would like to take a moment to commend both Speaker Wentworth and Majority Leader Shirkey. For a long time, they've been articulating the need for a metrics-based system to exit out of this these pandemic restrictions. And I think their leadership and their voice on that helped move the governor, very, in this direction. And I think there's still work to be done, and we're going to still have conversations at the quadrant level and with the governor. But I think their consistent voice on that issue provided the push to help make us move in that direction. So I couldn't agree more with what Leader Lasinski said. I think having a clear path out, giving people understanding of when those restrictions will be lifted is extremely important. This has been a difficult year for all of us, and this pandemic has caused a lot of stress in almost all aspects of our life. And the sooner we can move out of it and get back to some sense of normalcy, the better we're all going to be.
Speaker Wentworth, that you said that you'll be pushing to improve the plan. There's some more things that you'd like to see. Could you elaborate a little, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about the plateau, I mean, I think there's obviously I agree with the leader on encouraging people to get the vaccine and accessibility. I think there are still gaps in our state where we can improve the accessibility. I think that should be one of our main focuses. At the same time, when we do plateau, because a lot of our folks that are using the data to look at what is that plan for that next few weeks, what does the next month look like, and our ability to get shots in arms, and we're seeing this potential plateau. What are we going to do when that happens? Are we just going to stay at that plateau? There are going to be people that have already obviously gotten COVID, who have antibodies that don't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason. There's other folks that are just not they don't want to get the vaccine. So we can only encourage so many people to do that, and we want to do that as fast as possible. And so when that plateau happens, what other items are we going to look at? Infection rates, hospitalization rates. What are we going to use to help get through that phase of potential plateau? And that's just looking ahead. That's just another additional piece of hope and certainty that we can give people. Because a lot of that conversation is, well, what if we don't ever get to 70? What does that look like? And I get that. That's a possibility. So how do we give some more sense of hope and certainty in that plan?
Have there been any discussions among the quadrant and with the governor's office about a coordinated campaign to urge people to get vaccinated? I mean, show some bipartisan support across the spectrum to try and get us to that 70% number, or as close as we can get?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a COVID vaccine clinic in the House, the Senate, and the administration to help vaccinate staff and legislators, and so we've done that. I think for me personally, it's more about focusing on accessibility and making sure that when people want to get the vaccine, they can get the vaccine same day. That is available in parts of our state, but not all of our state. There's still a backup in areas. There's like my local pharmacy doesn't have vaccines, so there's an issue with accessibility. And I think if we want to focus as a quadrant on that piece and not putting people in buckets, and when you encourage someone to get a vaccine versus vaccine shaming, that there's a difference there. And when you call out certain groups of people, I think that creates the animosity that I don't want to be a part of. I want to be a part of the positive. If you want to get the vaccine, you should be able to get it. Let's focus on accessibility, make sure that there's vaccines across our state and that they're equitable.
When you say vaccine shaming, Mr. Speaker, what are you talking about? What would an example of that be?
Like, there's been comments, made, and there's been obviously studies that have been done, and Republicans, I think some studies actually showed Republican men, Republican women are hesitant to get the vaccine. I don't think it's that they're not going to get the vaccine, but they're hesitant in getting the vaccine. And I think politics at play there. There may be some underlying visually there. At the same time, I'm not going to focus on individual groups. I want to focus on accessibility, making sure that people that want to get the vaccine get the vaccine. I think as we do that, that trust and confidence continues to build. And I think some groups that maybe be hesitant to get the vaccine would start getting that. But if we focus on the groups and we just focus on separating us into these camps, it creates that problem.
Leader Shirkey, is it in your opinion, is it people who can get the vaccine, is it a patriotic responsibility to do so?
No, I think it's a personal choice to make. Everybody, we get up in the morning every day and we take risks in just about everything we do. And this is just another risk assessment for every single person. And so making sure that you've studied the data, studied the information, understand where things are accessible and where they're available. I believe I've talked to a couple of health systems actually this morning, and they're having more. They have more shots than they have arms right now. And so I've been consistent and will continue to be consistent. I strongly encourage anyone who desires to get one of these shots or 2 shots, please do so, and do so. There's plenty of opportunities to do so right now.
Mm-hmm. So I guess I should let the Democratic leadership weigh in on this. Would you argue that it is a patriotic responsibility for people who can get vaccinated to go get vaccinated, especially in an environment where we're at or approaching the point where there are more vaccines than people who are ready to get them?
Thank you for the question, Rick. As I look and think about the risk assessments that we make every day, I think we need to put that in the context of a virus that's highly contagious, that has variants that could have the impact of changing our trajectory. We're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We have that availability. We need to work on some more of those areas in the state to make sure everyone has that accessibility. But I think if there's anything we've learned over this pandemic year, it's that the voices of leadership matter. And so I appreciate so much Senate Majority Leader Shirkey's statements that he encourages everyone to move forward and to take a look at the facts and to take a look at the vaccine. I think that as we look at that risk assessment, we need to remember that we're not just putting ourselves at risk when we choose not to be vaccinated. It's like looking at a red light. The reason we have them is because we're all better off when we all stop at red lights. I may want to make a risk assessment that, I can just shoot through that and it won't be a problem. That's just not okay. And so we need to look at vaccination, what's available, where we can get it, what we know about its safety and effectiveness, not just in the context of our personal selves, but in the context of those who are around us. And I think that's something that does make this. You can think about your patriotism, you can think about your community, you can think about your loved ones also as a factor in your decision to move forward with a vaccine.
Does it make sense then, Leader Lasinski, and then I'll certainly go back to you, Leader Ananich, to have what some people are calling vaccine passports, that you have to show proof of either one vaccine or a complete vaccine regimen in order to engage in certain activities? Does that make sense? Oh, that was for you, Leader Lasinski.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for that question. I think that's what's so important about the Back to Normal plan that the governor has put forward, is that this is about our collective responsibility. And when we reach different levels of collective societal within Michigan vaccination levels, different activities can open up. I think that's where we need to stay focused. We know that there are going to be, different reasons and different paces that folks step forward for the vaccine. But we want to look at this as our collective whole. It's how do we all move forward together? And I believe that's where we should stay focused.
So you think that vaccine passports, to use the shorthand, is not productive?
I think it's not our priority right now. Our priority right now is to get as many people vaccinated as fast as we can, to get folks back in offices doing work, getting our retailers open, bustling, having our restaurants and bars serving and building joy in our communities. That's where we need to focus, and keeping it safe for our educators and students. We have to have our kids back in school. And the more folks who are vaccinated, the quicker we can do all of that.
Well, Leader Ananich, I mean, a version of the same question to you, which is that just like other types of vaccines, in order for teenagers to return to school, should they have to show proof of vaccination?
Well, I think we should make sure it's available for high school students in particular, because we know they can spread the virus. But I'm just a firm believer that we're in a moment here in our state, in our country, where inspiration, we're encouraging folks to think about the we, not necessarily just the me, is a much stronger way to do things. We're a divided country right now. And pretend like we're not. is not going to solve the problem. So working on doing things as the collective good and encouraging it versus, as Speaker Wentworth said, shaming someone or forcing someone to do something, I don't think it'll be productive. I would encourage all the folks that are watching, that are business owners, to incentivize their employees if they choose to. Or at the very least, give them accessibility to go and get the shot, and some grace for folks that may have a short-term reaction to the shot. But I think together we're at a moment where we can really encourage and see the light at the end of the tunnel, and really encourage folks to take the best decision for them, have as much information as possible. I'm very confident we're going to reach that 70%. From what the polling I've seen, a large percentage of people have every intention of getting the shot, and then there's another large segment that they have some hesitancy, but they're open to it. And I think if we can inspire, we can reach that number, and we can I mean, a lot of folks in Michigan, we all know this. All my friends here, a big date for us is the 4th of July. I know I'm going to be enjoying it, most likely up north. I shouldn't tell my constituents that, but I'll be back. I won't be up there very long. I guess the benefit of being a term limited legislator, but I'll be enjoying it. And I want us all to be able to feel comfortable doing that, right? Because we have wide varieties of comfortability in our state right now when it comes to interacting within society. And I want to make sure everyone can reach a level of comfort so that they know if they go out and do things that they're going to be as safe as they possibly can.
Speaker Wentworth, I'd like to go to you next, and then followed by Leader Shirkey. So how close are we now that it seems like we're approaching some kind of accord regarding COVID restrictions and a path forward? How about something, an agreement on how to use the 10 or 11 billion dollars? I mean, there's a time like the rounding error, and that could be the general fund in previous sessions. That's a game-changing amount of money that's supposed to be devoted towards safety and economic recovery. Are we going to get an agreement on how to spend that money that right now is sitting in Washington, Speaker Wentworth?
Yeah, definitely. I'm hopeful that we'll find an agreement. I've said this all along, where when the three branches are at the table negotiating, there's better outcomes for the state of Michigan. When it's just two branches or one, acting unilaterally, we're not going to have better outcomes. So it goes both ways. So I want the administration at the table when we're negotiating the budget. At the same time, the legislature has to be at the table in the path out. How are we going to get out of this pandemic? What happens, next month or 2 months or 3 months, if we have a variant or a vaccine resistant, variant or strand? What is the involvement with the legislature? How do we, engage in that process? And then what does it look like administration engaging in the budget process? But on both sides, I believe that we'll have better outcomes for the state of Michigan if we're working together.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that an understanding, a deal on re-engagement is a component of coming up with a deal on how to spend COVID money. Basically, you want to have veto over one in order to approve the other.
It's just a matter of an agreement on how do we move forward with both those pieces of things that we have to do in the future, budget and COVID and our way out. Right. I know the governor she rolled out her plan. That's a part of a plan. I don't think that's the full path out, because again, we could have a variant later on. And what does that look like for us as a legislature? Is it going to be the governor coming out with another order or an issue? How are we going to both partner on this process between the Senate, the House, and the governor? So I'm saying that when we do that together on the budget, we have a better outcome. I agree that when we do that, we will have a better outcome.
If there's a variant crisis, is another emergency order a non-starter for you?
No, I'm not going to say anything's a non-starter. We don't know what's going to happen and what that variant looks like or what it does to our state. And so I do believe that the legislature being at the table, we will have a better outcome for the people of Michigan.
Leader Shirkey, so a version of the same question to you. What does it take to get to an understanding about how to use what is literally a future shaping amount of money that's waiting for us to use.
Well, the first thing I hope we learn is not to follow the federal government, because the supplementals, the stimulus money that they've sent ostensibly for one purpose is full of pork for many other things. The Senate is focused on this high level description, and it is focusing on capital constrained needs. It's needs that we know are existing, that we have a hard time aggregating the dollars together to be able to address them. And this is an opportunity now for having billions of dollars available at our fingertips to prioritize those capital constrained needs and address them. And being very careful about making sure we are not establishing material ongoing expenses at the same time. And so the categories that we'll be focusing on, and I believe there's common interest on all of these, are roads, bridges, water and sewer systems, broadband, education, and business recovery. Those 6 categories there are all legitimate, and there are some capital constraints in all of those that we can use this money very effectively and avoid the trap of creating ongoing expenses for a budget into the future.
Well, let me ask a question related to that, because certainly there are capital expenses. That building a bridge, for example, is a one-time expense in the sense that you create the thing and then it's there, but then once it's done, it's also got to be maintained. Would you call road repairs, fixing the damn roads, a one-time expenditure in terms of what you're talking about? Or is that something more like an ongoing expense?
So I believe the highest priority when it comes to transportation infrastructure, we should be looking at bridges and dams, for instance. Those are the areas where we have a really difficult time aggregating enough money on an ongoing basis to take care of those. They always get band-aided. And by the way, when you do fix them properly, like we can do now with this kind of money, their maintenance costs actually go down compared to what they have been historically for a number of years. And we have an opportunity then to maintain them and keep those maintenance costs at a level cost. So I think roads, we are not going to be at a loss for orange barrels and orange cones this summer. I'm already seeing them across the state. We're spending a record amount of money this year on roads, and MDOT is doing a fantastic job. And so I think we should focus on the things that we always have difficulty finding funding for. But it's not just roads. As I mentioned, water and sewer systems across the state, everybody knows of the opportunities and the risks that are associated with those, that always is consistently difficult to put the money together, raise millages locally to get that kind of work done. And I think this is a perfect use for these kinds of funds.
Did you include rural broadband in that?
I did. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Sure did.
Okay. I'm sorry, Leader Lasinski, you look like you're trying to jump in there.
Thank you, Rick. I wanted to reflect on a couple parts of your question there. One, Senate Majority Leader Shirkey and the buckets that he outlined are absolutely, I believe, the priorities across our quadrants as we look at those categories of broadband, water, and infrastructure, capital improvements in those. But the first part of your question and where you really began was, how do we work together to do that? And for that, I've really been reflecting on that, particularly today, us working together as a quadrant, us working together as legislators, us working together with the business community, because it was a year ago today that armed militia members were in our chamber. A year ago today, politics in Michigan changed. The legislature changed. How we work together changed when armed men and militia were welcomed inside our Capitol. When we saw tactics of domestic terrorism and political intimidation used, as I stood 10 feet inside a swinging door with men outside with assault rifles. And it's with that change that we have to have some accountability as we move forward. And we have to have the language of leadership change in order for us to work together on what can be transformational change here in Michigan. And so, as a business owner myself, as my husband is an entrepreneur, I so applaud many of the business leaders here on this call who stepped forward and raised your collective voice in support of democracy, in support of ensuring that your customers, our constituents, the citizens of Michigan, have their voice heard in this process as we make these enormous decisions around the federal dollars that are here. We hear those voices through people's vote. That's how we hear those voices. And so, working together to me means supporting and strengthening our democratic institutions and not tearing them down. And for that, I believe that all four of us as leaders, Senate Majority Leader Speaker Wentworth, my colleague, Senate Minority Leader Ananich, and I need to pledge together that we will do that. We will support the principles outlined in the letter from the business community, supporting the removal of obstacles to voting, supporting making it easier for citizens, constituents, your customers' voices being heard. And I would like us to make that pledge today to work together, that anything move forward is truly bipartisan and truly is with this intent of making it easier for folks' voice to be heard in our democracy.
Well, since you preempted one of my questions now, it is exactly that a lot of members of the business community are asking that the legislature not go forward with things that are described as voting restrictions, for example. And considering the contentiousness of that, considering the fact that a lot of business leaders are opposed to that as well, Speaker Wentworth, Leader Shirkey, is that a constructive direction to go in?
I'll take it, Jason, from here, all right? First. All right. So the letter that we received from many of the premier CEOs in Southeast Michigan in particular, but they were across the state as well. I think they listed 8 principles, and there's not a single one of those principles that I disagree with, and there's not a single one of those principles that the bills that have been drafted and are going through the legislative process are in conflict with. I've already been very public about challenging the notion that without really understanding and reading the language of most of the bills, those that think that having an ID is a problem to vote. And this is another call to action to those listening. If getting an ID, accessing an ID in the 21st century in Michigan is truly a problem, then we should all join hands and figure out how to solve that problem. Set aside elections. Just set it aside for a moment. I don't know how anybody survives and thrives and actually navigates to life today, regardless of where they are on the economic spectrum, without having an ID. And so we have been working for the last 3 weeks with help from many in the business community. I won't name names, identifying what those constraints are, and we're going to remove them. And this doesn't require a lot of money, but it requires a commitment and a will to do so. And we're going to remove that obstacle, Rick.
I mean that, and that's all well and good, but there is a difference between having a driver's license or an ID, which legally is considered a privilege, versus voting, which is a right.
Making sure that people who are registered to vote are citizens of Michigan is also a requirement of this process. And the best way to do that is through a state-issued ID. This polls nationally. No matter what the demographic is, it polls in favor of having an ID to vote, no matter what the demographic is.
Leader Ananich?
Thank you. I'm not a big believer in, put my thing up in the air and just making policy decisions based on individual polls. But I think it's important to know that that is just patently untrue. That the letter that was sent to from the business community about access to the voting booth. This is not about a singular issue where they're trying to limit it down and really narrow it down to it being about IDs. It has almost nothing to do with it. There's 39 bills here that dramatically reduce people's ability to vote. And more importantly, they also insert a large level of partisan politics into our voting. And let me give you some examples about. There's over a half dozen bills that give extreme amounts of power to the unelected partisan board of canvassers and give them even more power in this package of bills. It has nothing to do with the principles that was given to us in that letter, and I think those principles are very good. And I think that needs to be make sure that is noted, and that there's some clarity around what's going on here. This is a nationwide effort. They're even using the same terminology. Easier to vote, harder to cheat. Other states are using the same exact language. This is a national effort. And I think there should be a national effort to make sure that people have access to voting, that we have more people participating in our process. Because you're losing out on ideas does not mean that you limit people's access to the voting booths. Businesses across the state and across this country are deciding that, are making business decisions every day. They're being more inclusive in the way that they're hiring people and their business practices, and they should expect the same from their government. Now, let me give you some examples where, in practical nature, reading these bills and how they would be interpreted, you could have Board of Canvassers basically throw out elections in the county and at the state level. They can record you voting. They put this exact language in this bill. That polls off the charts against it if we're going to use poll-based information. They can record the tabulation of voting, so they can see you multiple ways in how you're voting. America, we pride ourselves on having privacy in the voting booth, and I think that is something that we should continue to make sure is a principle of our democracy, a principle of our system. I'm happy to have a bipartisan effort on voting. Kentucky, a deep blue, a deep red state with a Democratic governor, worked on bipartisan bills that include access, encourage access to voting. We can do the same thing here. And I encourage business leaders to continue to talk and continue to lend their voices to this effort. It's extremely important.
Speaker Wentworth, is there a way to bridge these differences? Because clearly, whether or not you want them to be wedge issues, I mean, clearly they are.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a contentious issue that I think it's important that we have discussions and we have these debates. Obviously, the forum have them as public. We go through a committee process. So I think I encourage the collaboration, the deliberation. I think people weighing in on this is good, but we got to protect the process that the Senate will go through the committee and through the full body. That's what we do as legislators. That's what we do as government. So I think it's good that we're having this discussion. These are obviously this is a Senate package. The House has bills that we're also working on. At the end of the day, I'm all about protecting the process that we go through as legislators to ensure that there is this hearty debate and discussion to ensure we are fleshing out the best possible policy going forward. And hopefully that's a consensus based, but sometimes it's not going to be, obviously, in politics.
Okay. With 1 minute left to go, just a round robin, would you sign a petition and would you support an initiative to end term limits in Michigan? Leader Shirkey.
No, but I would certainly support amending them to, for instance, 16 or 20 years without limitations as to which chamber. I do think they are too short. I think I voted for them when it was on the ballot, 93. And I think it was an experiment that has generally paid off, but I also think it was short-sighted. And like every other piece of legislation that's passed, it deserves to be reviewed to see what we can learn from it. And I think there's some tweaks we can do here that'll make it better.
Thanks. Speaker Wentworth.
No, but I do encourage the conversation that the Senate Majority Leader is pointing to.
So you think that term limits are too restrictive here in Michigan?
I think it's worth a discussion and the conversation. I think we owe it to our state.
Okay. Leader Lasinski?
Yes, we need changes to our term limit system, whether it's extension or elimination. We have too many folks who are very valuable to the chamber just get to understand how to pass good bills, bipartisan efforts, develop the relationships, and it's time for them to be gone. We need change.
Okay. Final word, Leader Ananich.
10 years ago, Senator Shirkey and I came into the House together. He and I couldn't agree with him more. I think every piece of legislation we introduce, or whether it's citizen or otherwise, should be reviewed. I think term limits is past time to be reviewed, and I agree with him that I don't think repealing would be fine, but I think the voters would be much more open to weighing in on an extension, and I think that's a viable way to go forward.
Okay, the legislative quadrant, thank you very much for taking my questions. Thank you to the Detroit Regional Chamber and its members, and thank you for the invitation to do this. It's been a privilege.
Please welcome back Brad Williams.
Well, Rick and Representative Lasinski, Speaker Wentworth, Senator Shirkey, Senator Ananich, thank you so much. I wish we had more time. We were really getting into it there, and I appreciate so much hearing that everyone is listening to the business community's perspective on voting rights, and I know you listen to our perspective on so many other issues, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you on not just that issue, but all the other issues that were discussed today. Thank you again to Rocket Mortgage and Quicken Loans for supporting this session today. It was a really valuable session. I hope you found it as valuable as I did. I was taking notes all the way through. It was really valuable for me and the work I did. Have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again. We're going to do another one of these here in the next couple of months. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you again soon.